And you become really, I think that space in between graduating from school and then actually getting into your career, into your work, is that you learn how to be that very strong advocate for yourself and your work byproduct, and you just become an expert.
Welcome back to Have a Map, where we talk all things career. I'm your host, Mamadou Njai, and today we have one of our interns who just finished finals, so perfect timing for that. But Hadir, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm a student at UIC here in Chicago, and I'm studying economics and communications. And I'm actually a senior about to graduate next semester, so.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I know it's probably been a journey that feels like forever. So to get to the end is amazing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Of course. And today we have a friend of the podcast, somebody who I actually went to school with. We kind of were on different time frames. I think I was coming in as she was leaving. But Britney Bouie, how are you doing today?
I am well. Glad to be chit-chatting with new and old friends. So we are good over here.
How's your day been going today? Like, I know it's a crazy Monday, and we're right in fourth quarter where things are ending. So let's do a quick check-in. How's that going for you?
Yeah, so we are definitely wrapping up Q4 of what I think everyone can say has been a wild year. So it has been a good Monday. It's been a productive Monday on my end, but it's interesting. I've started a new role actually a few weeks ago. So right now I am literally in the midst of learning all new things and then also leading all new things. So it's been one of those Mondays that I've been on the go. But I like it when I can check a few things off my to-do list, which I've been able to. So I'll chalk it up as a good Monday.
That's good. That's good. And as we kind of just get started, right? You do a lot. So let's maybe start with like the foundation, because I know this is a new job, right? So maybe we can talk a little bit about like, what are you doing now? Like, what is your current role and what does that mean, right? Because for us with this podcast, it's all about telling, a lot of, and kind of backtracking, right? A lot of students know, oh, this is the job that I want or the career that I think I want, but I don't even know what it looks like on a day-to-day basis, right? Mm-hmm. So for you, what career are you in and what does that look like?
Yeah, so I currently serve as a communications director for a Illinois state agency. So obviously I really just started. So what my day-to-day, we're still coming into play at this point, still learning. But so I'm essentially leading the communications effort for this state agency. So my day-to-day is definitely, touching base with all of the internal department heads. That's everyone from the actual like executive senior leadership, and then those that are on the internal staff managerial level as well. And as a communications director, I do everything from strategic level communications. So that's like internal communications, newsletters, things of that nature, overseeing social media, our digital efforts, and then the public relations stuff. So that's the external focus on how are we, getting the brand itself, the agency itself into these, critical stories in the public eye. So it definitely is that type of role where no one day is the same as the next. We're kind of beholden to the media. I work in an organization that also has some political tie-in. So, we're also beholden to what the two political parties are dealing with and, what is facing them. But it definitely is an interesting opportunity. It's one of those challenges where it's so different. It's kind of fun because you never know what's coming at you.
So what does a typical day look for you? Like pre-COVID, after COVID?
Yeah, so I think COVID, it's funny when we say what a typical day is. I think a typical day is you're hoping that there's no fire drill happening due to COVID. So For me, I would say, you know, I kick it off. I'm gratefully able to work from home. So once I like get my tea boiled and I'm sitting down I'm actually working at my kitchen table. I still haven't gotten a real desk, but that's neither here nor there. But once I've sat down with my cup of tea, it's really kicking it off with emails, seeing what came. Obviously, it's a Monday, so checking up on all of, you know, any news stories that have hit, any, you know, touch points with my actual team. So I do lead a team with several folks, seeing anything that their to-do list, some of their projects that they're manning, making sure, you know, I'm abreast of what they're doing. Checking in with my supervisor, who is actually the executive director of the state agency. So she oversees everyone. So touching base with her, and then it kind of just depends on what I'm working on. Like today, so since I'm still relatively new, I'm still getting to have these sort of one-on-ones with, you know, the internal folks that work there. So I had a chit chat with one of the commissioners for the agency I work with and his team. And then I had actually another call with the governor's communications team and actually all of the state agencies across Illinois. So that's interesting, getting the chance to see what everyone else is doing and how, you know, everyone's communications efforts are either stemming from, you know, state politics or initiatives that are happening, and then also having the opportunity to clue people into what we're doing at my agency. So that was definitely the first half of my day. And then the second half is hopefully trying to get things done on my to-do list. So again, since it's the last quarter of the year and we're wrapping up, we're in the process of doing sort of like a year-end newsletter. So I've been editing a lot of the internal articles that are coming from internal teams, and then coordinating with folks to make sure, you know, they're approving what's about to go out. So it definitely is one of those, you're reading a lot, you are checking in with a lot of people just to make sure things are, you know, up to date. And I think it's interesting as someone new coming into the agency, having the ability to read all these articles. I'm like, oh, so this is what they do. Okay, so I definitely would advocate for, whenever you're coming into a new role or a new position, reading as much as you possibly can, because I mean, that's where the information is. And then actually following up, having conversations with people. You can't be too scared to be like, hey, can I grab some time on your calendar? Or, hey, can we chat about this? Because they're the ones doing the day-to-day work. So you want to make sure you know what they're doing as well.
No, and that's fascinating. I feel like that nugget of information is super important as far as like following up with people, right? And really getting on their calendars to understand the full scope of it. And that's one thing we always talk about in the internship, is making sure that you're involving the correct parties. And before you even involve them, you need to get to know them, right? Because if you got a last minute project you need and they don't even know you, they're just gonna be like, what do you need? I can't do that. I got something to do, right? Like you got to really build that rapport. So like that's really interesting.
No, absolutely. I think that's in every role that I've taken on, any organization, I'm always, it's sort of like what you call the listening tour. So you come in, you obviously are introduced as whatever your role is, the new person to the org, the new person to the team, but actually hearing what people do. Because I think a lot of times people assume what certain teams do and what certain departments do, but you don't actually know. You're not doing their job. So you have no idea. So it actually is building that rapport, building that relationship, but that goodwill, because there's going to come a day where something's going to come out of left field and you need something by midnight on this day. And like, yes, if you have that relationship, you can call them up, you can text them and be like, hey, I really need this. But if you don't, and you have to do a cold call to somebody that's actually in your org, that's sad. You don't want to do that. So there's ways to avoid that. So
that's so true. And one thing I want to touch on before we go deeper into your start is, you've had multiple roles, right? And been able to work in a very diverse, you know, I would say diverse roles, right? Ones that don't look all the same, right? But have an underlying theme and story to them. But can you highlight real quickly, and it doesn't have to be too fast, but highlighting some of the previous roles you've worked in and a little bit about that work that you've done as well?
Yeah, so I have definitely had a variety of different roles, but all falling under the communications, public relations, and a bit of marketing umbrella. So I cut my teeth as far as communications at a boutique PR and communications firm called Hawthorne Strategy Group here in Chicago. So it's an agency. I worked on a variety of different clients, everyone from Red Bull, Chicago's Children's Choir, Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, like a little bit of work with Navy Pier. So a variety of different clients, but all of the work was either, internal, external communications, social and digital strategy, traditional PR. So that's like, pitching the stories to the media. And I would definitely say starting my career off at an agency gave me probably the best experience. It definitely can be exhausting when you start at an agency because you're juggling so many different clients and the projects definitely differ depending on the client, but you actually get so much variety of experience. And so I definitely think that was very informative to my career. And so was there, I worked full time while in grad school, and then decided like, hey, I like communications. I really do enjoy this work, but I don't think I want to juggle, 6, 7 different clients doing, such a wide array of work. So when I was deciding to transition after graduating, I was like, okay, I really enjoyed the organizations where I can see the impact that they're doing in the community. I can see how they're, whether it was Chicago's Children's Choir, dealing with youth and then actually impacting in these neighborhoods. So when I was looking for different roles, that was something I was really focusing on. And then I was able to transition as the public relations manager for Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago and Northwest Indiana. So that was definitely a great opportunity. I'm a Girl Scout alum myself, so I sold the cookies and all. And it was interesting to see how the brand has advanced in these, years since I was a Girl Scout, since I was a little girl, and just how the work is still impactful. So it was a great chance to really get in. I was able to pretty much own the PR, external relations type work. And so it's great when you get in and you're like, oh, I get to like really, steer this ship. So that was a great opportunity. And then transitioned earlier this year, actually in March, right before the shutdown, I started at another semi-state or city agency, I should say, that does economic development called World Business Chicago here. In great opportunity. I was staffing the CEO and doing internal, external communications, media relations. But I definitely continue to learn the value of pivoting. So I started at a nonprofit right before the shutdown. And of course, as we all saw, like COVID hit economically so many different institutions, and World Business Chicago went through a round of layoffs. And so I was let go, and that pretty much gave me the opportunity to explore what else I might be interested in. And I was like, okay, a lot of different work going on, and I had some opportunities as far as interviewing, and then this current role at, it's actually called, sorry, I don't think I mentioned it, the Illinois Commerce Commission, which oversees the regulation of utility companies and different organizations like that. So that came up, and I was like, this will be a challenge. I get to still do communications, the work I like, but also get to explore leadership. So having the opportunity to be, on the senior leadership team, and then also be leading a team of my own. So I decided, we're in COVID, it's 2020, it's wild. Might as well try something different. So that's where we are.
And how did you know after what did you major in college? How did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I am an advocate of you try things, and if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you try something else. So Mo and I obviously went to undergrad together at DePaul University. And my major in undergrad was political science and international studies. And so I was always on the law school track. And I went to law school. I actually did a year and a half of law school here in the city. And I was like, I hate this. I am not in love with this. I don't think I want to be a lawyer for the next 20, 30 years of my career. no, get me out of here. And I gratefully have a very supportive family. My parents are like, you have not been happy. Like, okay, take some time, figure out what you want to do. So I took a little time out, and I had always been interested in communications. I've always been interested in history and politics and just how that works and how communications feeds into that. And I just never explored it in undergrad because I was like, oh, I'm going to law school, so I'll just do all these poli-sci classes and all of that type stuff. And when I was like, okay, I know I want to do a transition, and so decided to look at communications programs, and then found a program that I really like the sound of at Loyola University, also here in Chicago. And so did my program there for 2 years. And I mean, it just worked. I was like, oh, I like this. Like, I like being able to tell stories. I like being able to shape like the narrative of an organization internally and externally. But I also think my journey to getting to communications is just as impactful and informative. Like I met a lot of great people having went to law school. And it's always great to have an attorney or two on your team. Never shy away from having them in the group. But I also learned a very interesting way of thinking, like analyzing an issue from not just my perspective or my organization's perspective, but the other side. What's the other side thinking? What do they want? What do they need? And, how do we all come into play? So it was just a part of my journey that had to happen. And now I think it's actually been helpful in some of my roles, particularly in communications. And I just think you just kind of know once you start. I think you feel it. Like some people definitely go to school and they know from jump this is what they want to do and that's what they end up. But I am definitely not one of those people. Like I ended up making a switch.
That's amazing, because you said that your favorite part about like communications is actually reaching out to other people and the impact you saw it had on like your environment or like other people. And that's exactly like why I also decided to go into communications, because I was originally an economics major. And I also wanted to go to law school. And then I'm like, let's just see how this communication goes for me first and see how much of an impact I can have on other people before actually going into law school. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Definitely. Just a minute. Okay. Well, don't want to lose you guys because my phone might die. So welcome to Mondays, where your technology almost kind of works.
Yeah, I feel you.
Alrighty. No, but definitely, I think the best part or a good part about communications is that you end up touching so many different aspects of whatever organization you work with, or whatever you just end up doing. If you're working for yourself, like there's so many different opportunities to learn about other lines of business, other different industries. And I think that's something else I've enjoyed. So even though I'm not an attorney, I've definitely still had to do a lot of like legal aspects and learn about that and how that affects what I'm doing. So I think communications is one of those careers where you get to dabble a little bit. So it doesn't get boring, I will say that.
And within communications, right? What have been some of maybe your favorite projects, right? Because I've seen you on TV, speaking on behalf from people. I feel like I see you in a lot of places and people always know your name. So like, you're very well known in the city. So with that, right, what have been some of those favorite projects? And I'm always curious to know, are your favorite projects the ones where you're in front of the camera sometimes or, behind the camera? So.
Yeah, I will say my favorite projects are the ones where I got to see those stories come to life and like a great media opportunity. And I just think that's just one of the ways you're like, for a fact that far more people were able to see it. Like if you got it on the morning news or you got it on the evening news, like you're like, oh, people saw this. So that was impactful. But I don't always need to be the person in front of the camera. It just has worked out that way a few times. I think so. I absolutely love the projects and the people I got to work with at Girl Scouts. It was already dear to my heart, and then getting inside the organization and seeing how the people actually care about young girls and like developing opportunities for them. And so my favorite opportunities and projects were the ones where I got to see, girls in grade school or girls in like high school, like coming into their own. So actually one of the fun projects we got to work on was when Michelle Obama was touring for Becoming, her book. And they kicked off the tour here in Chicago at United Center. And one of her producers actually tapped us to have one of our Girl Scouts actually go on stage to like say like who she was becoming. And so it was a Girl Scout I had worked with previously. And we worked on like her statement and everything. And she got to go on stage there. We weren't able to meet Michelle and Oprah, even though I tried. I really was trying to get us to meet them. But we also did get Michelle to retweet us later. So that was cool. But it was just one of those great opportunities where she got to shine. And it's like, I love to see that. Like she was the living embodiment of like, you know, girl leadership and girl exploration. And so that was so great to have that opportunity to play a hand in that. So I think that is what I have loved the most opportunities like that. And I actually like ended my tenure at Girl Scouts working on a Good Morning America story. And so it was a great opportunity to highlight one of our actual male volunteers, a dad who had been volunteering for years within the org. And so being able to, one, get it on Good Morning America and that type of story, but see that come to light, seeing the girls that were also able to play a role in that. So I love the stories. I love being able to see those stories be told to more people. And then when people come back to say like, oh, I saw that. And like, I didn't even know that. Like people are like, wait, men volunteer at Girl Scouts? Absolutely, they do. Okay. When girls are being empowered by everyone, we're all doing great. So I love that type of stuff.
That's so cool. I really think like, one, you never even like, maybe it's just me, but I feel like you don't think of like all these stories behind the scenes of Girl Scouts, right? Because I feel like we know, a lot of people just know them for their cookies, but not like the leadership, right? Like I feel like a lot of people understand that that's what they're teaching them, but you don't really get to see the behind the scenes, right? You might just see the pop up at the spot, or your friend's daughter reaching out to you and being like, hey, you want to buy some cookies? But like knowing their true story and how it even came to be, right? Like I feel like those are things that most people don't know of. And that's beautiful. Like I think that story and like what you were talking about with having the Girl Scout on the stage, kicking off the Becoming tour is amazing, right? Because it shows the multi sides of what Girl Scouts of America is.
So how do you like manage like your work and your like personal life, and like how do you take care of you outside of your work?
Definitely. So that is still a work in progress. I will fully admit. I feel like 2020, I think can't be reiterated enough, has been a wild year, but it has given me a chance to slow down because obviously the world shut down and our country shut down to a certain extent. And so not having as many events to go to, I definitely think worked out in my favor a bit, because a lot of communications, public relations is a social career. It's a social industry. And so I was frequently at events either from my 9 to 5. I also have my own consulting business called BGB Strategy. So either I'm also at my own client events or just in general networking and being in the industry. So it was a lot of like on the go. And so I would like, a month would be like, oh, I had like one free weekend or maybe one free day out of this weekend. So reminding myself that like I am not a robot, like I eventually have to like turn off. It's been something that I have learned this year and what I hope to be able to continue to keep in practice. And then remembering that like our wellness it's a whole holistic, like whole body experience. So mentally, physically, emotionally. So I've gotten better at incorporating like mental wellness practices. So I've upped my meditation quite extensively this year, and then also gotten back into a regular yoga routine. And so I think for those having a like carved out time, I'm big, again, we still have so much to do when you're still working. But I even put it on my schedule, like, okay, like I know I'm doing yoga, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and then, or Saturday evenings. And like, oh, I have to meditate at least 3 times a week in order to feel like I have some semblance of balance. So prioritizing things that make you feel good is definitely like, that's not selfish. That is like for the betterment of us all. Because if you're good, then you can also bring your best self to whatever you're coming to. So I think that's really been a key for me, is prioritizing that and not cheating myself of those things, because I know it's what I need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the energy that you bring to the table. So you got to work on yourself to be able to bring out that energy, like that positive energy, to be able to communicate with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you talking about, I feel like we always talk about like self-care, or this idea of self-care as like a journey. And it's something that you're just constantly, I feel like it constantly evolves, right? Because your needs change, people's needs change for you. And then that's one thing we just kind of have to consistently just try things out, like you talked about initially, right? Just trying things out, seeing what works, what doesn't work. But for you, when thinking of this idea of self-care, when did that idea really like come to you, right? Because like for me, when I remember going to the fall, nobody was talking about like self-care. Like I don't remember anybody being like, yeah, take some time for yourself. It's gonna be okay, right? Because we live in a culture that's just like go, go, go. And especially in Chicago, talking about like events and things of that nature, which I miss, but then I also don't miss because I could just sit at home and you don't have to go outside.
Same.
But but like, when did that journey really start for you?
Yeah, so it kind of started with my like personal realization and transition. I was always on the grind. Like I was that person. I had a 5-year plan and then a tentative 10-year plan. Like I was in undergrad, like, okay, I finish this up, I go to law school, I do this type of law for this certain amount of years. I want to be a judge. It was a lot. Like even when I think about it now, I'm like, girl, you were stressed. Like, what was this? Breathe. But when I was transitioning, like it was kind of like, I was like, I felt a little bit like a failure, because I was like, oh, this is what I always said I was going to do. This is what people said I should do. And then I was like, I don't want to do this. So I actually I had a friend who told me about a gym that she was going to, and I tried it out, and I ended up like falling in love with like the workouts that we were doing there. And then it just ended up really helping me mentally. Like you don't always know when you're in the midst of a depression that you're actually depressed, but I really was, because I was just struggling. I just, didn't know the direction of my life and what I really wanted to do. But I was so used to always being on the go and always thinking I knew what I was doing and where I was going. So that was really the start of my personal like self-care journey. And I still don't even think at that time like it had gotten as trendy as it has now. And all trends aren't bad, but self-care definitely, it's become very popularized, and there's certain ways that it's packaged. But I am big on, you have to find what works for you, and everything, nothing in life is really a one size fits all, but particularly like our actual wellness. And so finding out that like, working out intensely in that way was like, helpful for me. And then I had a friend that introduced me to yoga, and that really was helpful. And then later on down the road, like it's only been like probably the last 2 or 3 years that I had gotten into meditation, because it was just something that I didn't really know about. Like, I think I had a class one time where someone had came in and done a meditation, a guided meditation with us, but it wasn't something that I had explored. So for me, and like even to your point about, it really is a journey. And you come to different aspects of it at different times in your life. When you really need something, I do feel what you need will come to you. It will find its way to you. So I have been very grateful about how my self-care journey has gone, but you do have to figure out what works for you. You do have to like prioritize that, because we still don't live in a culture, even in a world where everyone was like, or majority of folks are forced to be at home. We're still in a culture where people are on their computers till like 8, 9 p.m. So I think we do ourselves a greater service and others if we're like, no, like I'm turning my computer off at this time, or I'm going to take, this vacation day or this personal day, because you also give other people the license to do the same. Like at the end of the day, humans are just like, is it okay? Can I do this? So someone being like, oh, I did it for myself, you're like, oh, I guess I could do it too. So I think that's probably been like the general trajectory of my self-care. And it just continues to evolve like as I evolve.
Oh, that's so real. Hadir, do you relate to that? Because you're a current college student, so you're in the midst of it.
Absolutely. It's an every
Yeah.
for me, like between like taking care of myself and my mental health and like my physical health and like being able to actually tell myself it's going to be okay is really hard. So hearing that, like it's always going to be like a work in progress, like you said, like it will evolve. But like at the moment, it's really hard to actually convince myself that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think that's we have to, I mean, it's mentally talking to ourselves, and we have these thoughts, but reminding ourselves that like our thoughts are not always the exact reality. So it is a lot. I mean, a lot of life really is a mental thing, like really, you know, telling yourself like, oh no, I can get through this and this is how, or like, oh, I deserve this, because I mean, every human deserves the right to like feel well and have some time. So it definitely, you know, is a opportunity to navigate that space for yourself. But I'm here to say, as someone who has graduated from college, that one, you are definitely able to do it and you will do it, but take some time. Okay, like no one you look up and you're like 10 years down the road or just about, and you're like, wait, what? So give yourself that space and that time too, in the here and now.
And one thing I want to ask, and I completely slipped my mind, but for you, once you made that transition from like college work, right, to like career work, what was a thing that like really stood out to you where you're like, oh, I had no idea this is like how it actually worked?
That's a good question. I think for me, it was learning that it is not going to be a seamless process where it's like, oh, I did A, so of course B is going to happen, and then C is going to be the result. Like a lot of our schooling and the way the educational system is set up, it is very theoretical, and it gets a little better, I would say, in grad school, where you get to more like actual like practical knowledge and, you know, work, but it still is in these very controlled circumstances. So until you're actually in the experience itself and you're like, oh, it's not just like, you know, my teammate over here and me, and then we're deciding, it's like, oh, all of these internal stakeholders have a say in something, and then all of these external stakeholders, and then I have to convince everybody that this is what we should do. So I think for me, learning that skill of being able to truly like advocate for something that I'm telling people they should do. And you become really, I think, that space in between graduating from school and then actually getting into your career, into your work, is that you learn how to be that very strong advocate for yourself and your work byproduct. And you just become an expert. And it's a literal, like, you start feeling the expertise come into play. So that's an interesting, it definitely is, again, a journey, and you are going to have some growing pains in the beginning stages, because you're like, do I know what I'm talking about? Like, do I actually know? Like, I have a degree in this, but I'm not sure. But I think it gets easier as you realize, like, when you ask people, particularly folks that whether they've been in the industry, that's the value of getting mentors, that's the value of networking, finding other people that have been doing the work or have, you know, had similar experiences. You'll learn that, one, you're not alone in how you feel in that way. But then people are giving you advice on like how they navigate it. And you get to take that, whether with a grain of salt, or be like, okay, I'll take their experience and then this other person's experience and my like thoughts on it, and sort of mirror all those together and see what works. So I think that was one of the interesting aspects of transitioning into an actual career. I was like, okay, so I mean, it gives you a little bit of a freedom, because you're just like, oh, well, I can try this, but you're also like, wow, the guidebook is not accurate, because it is not always going to go the way I was told it does. So
I feel like that's one of the like, if you do this thing and that thing happens, that was the toughest thing. Like for me, emails is still my toughest thing. But like, you always think like, oh, if I send one email, the person's gonna get back to me, and it's like, no, sometimes you gotta send 3 emails, and sometimes it might be 4 or 5 emails, it might be 6 emails, right? And I think that's a hard thing to fathom.
That's funny that you mentioned. I know I am the person where I typically, depending on what it is, and there's just so much, like, I tell people, like, follow up with me because I've either seen it and I just forgot, or I actually didn't see it, it got buried. And it's funny, I even tell people, like, if they're texting me, like, if I haven't responded by like day 2, shoot the question mark, like, you know, whatever the expression you can do in iPhones, like, because I just literally need that reminder. But I actually had someone tell me, particularly in business, like, if you're dealing with people either at a certain level or depending on their roles, like, it is so easy for things to get lost in email or for things to just get lost in the shuffle. So following up at least 3 times. After the 3rd time, that's when you might be like, oh, maybe I'm pestering this person, or maybe they just don't want to get back to me. But like, following up the first time, the second time, like, a lot of people either expect that or are not offended by that. So I think it's like shaking ourselves, like, is this okay to do? And it's like, it is more than okay to do. So
Yeah, it's always funny. Hadir, any last questions that you have before we wrap up?
Yes, I have one more question. What is one thing you wish you knew, like you wish you knew back then, like when you first started? Like one thing you wish you knew that would have helped you?
I'll say 2 things, like 2 parts of this. The first one is I am allowed to mess up because I am human. I think I was always like, I had to do everything perfect. And if I didn't do things perfect, it's like, why did you do this wrong? And it's like, none of us are going to do every single thing correctly because that's impossible because we're actual humans. And so I think learning that, the earlier you can learn that, the earlier you can get better. Like if you're so hung up on you messed up, you can't even like take into account like, okay, how did I mess up? How does this apply to when I'm going to do this again the next time? So every like misstep is an actual opportunity for a lesson and an opportunity to get better, which I think the majority of folks are just wanting to get better. So give yourself that space. And then I think it's something that I feel like probably comes a little natural to me, but I've seen how it's benefited me. And I tell people, getting to know folks, like we are a social society. And so getting to know folks, and it doesn't have to be in your traditional networking ways where you're like, oh, I met this person at this event. At this point, post-COVID, I don't know if people will even be sharing business cards, but it doesn't have to be that way. But getting to know people, whether it's your folks at work and then having someone that like you build a great rapport with, you know, your classmates in particular, even if you diverge in ways as far as where your career goes, having people that know what you do, you know what they do, and then you can, you know, refer somebody or give opportunities. I think that is always something that people should remember because you never know like how those relationships will come into play. Like honestly, like just a quick tidbit, like my current role, like I didn't interview for anything after like, or I shouldn't say I didn't interview. I didn't officially apply for anything after I got let go. Like it was literally my network. And I wasn't even really actively telling people because I was going to take a little bit of a break, but my network kept reaching out to me and like, oh, this role is up, or I heard so-and-so was looking, are you interested? And so having a very strong network is what paid off for me. So I tell people like, get to know people, but make sure people know you because you never know how that'll play out for you. And that's it.
That's great advice. That's great advice. And one of our last question, we always like to wrap up with this one, something a little fun, and I did not give you a heads up on this, so it might be a little tougher. But what song, or maybe it's an artist, or maybe it's an album, would describe maybe the last few weeks that you've been having, right? Something maybe that you've been listening to on repeat that relates to you. What would that be? And then Hadir, you also have to answer this after Britney. And I'll answer mine last so I can have some extra time.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll go with like a genre. So watching 2 genres. I'm very hard. It's hard for me to always pick a one type situation, but definitely gospel has been getting me through. I like to start my mornings like, you know, lifted up in praise, but it's just very much reminding me that things can get better. Like joy comes in the morning, so there will be a brighter day. So definitely that. And then Afro beats. Like I am a Burna Boy stan, and I just like, particularly if the day is getting long, I need some good music. Like I would definitely throw in some Afro beats, and I just feel like that is also very uplifting. So those two genres would probably be, also according to Spotify, I believe those were both in my top 5. So they definitely have seen me through the past few weeks and the entirety of this year. So
I love that. Dear, what about you?
Well, for me, it's lately been like hip hop to like motivate myself and like get myself go outside, go do a workout before I run. I need to motivate myself, so it's usually like Drake. But like if I'm stressed out and need something to like put me in a feel good mood, I need
I like that. Very
yeah.
We
Yeah.
have a very, I would say, like, we just put together like a Spotify playlist on for our interns, and everybody has brought in such different music. So it's beautiful to see it all come together.
Oh, share that with me. I always like to see what other people are listening to. And I think that's a good way to get to know people. Like, oh, you listen to this, and just learn new things in general. So, I mean, music is good for the soul and it's good for your plants. That's a whole nother side, but it's just good for us as a country, as a world. So,
No, that's real. I relate to you on the gospel because I use Tidal, and Tidal, my number one song was Excellent by the Sunday Service Choir, which I did listen to that song all the time. And I think that was the first song on the album. So that was like my number one song that I listened to. And then outside of that, a mix between Burna Boy and Wizkid was on my other stuff. So
yes, Wizkid, yes.
Wizkid is definitely one of my favorites.
It's good stuff. When we, can have, larger events again, we'll have to make sure those are on the playlist, make sure that people get turned properly. So
of course, you gotta Afrobeats, I feel like I grew up with Afrobeats because both of my my parents are from like West Africa. So I've been really like tapped into that, but now it's like branded, right? Because before it was just like, oh, I know this song and kind of know the person, and now it's more so like this is the person and this is their catalog, which is very, very interesting. But I'm loving it.
Good stuff. Well, this has been fun. I'm always glad to chat with people. And it was definitely nice to meet you and learn more about what you're doing. We'll have to make sure we get connected via LinkedIn and what have you. But I'm also wishing you well on, the finalization of your college career. Trust me, you will feel like a weight and you'll be like, oh, I did it. And if you don't feel like that way, take a moment. Okay, take a beat. Because I think sometimes we're always like, okay, but what next? Take a moment.
Thank you. I feel like I'm already done with school, even though I still have one semester. But I'm like,
You are. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast tonight, Brittany. We appreciate it so much, and we just want to give you a round of applause. That's what we like to do at our internship.
Thank you.
Round of applause and love. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a great experience. So,
like I said, thanks again, and thanks to all that were listening today. Whether this is your morning routine, afternoon, or evening routine, we appreciate you tuning in and learning from our guest today. So, peace out. Skr, skr.